so left. I need answers. Inevitable. 40 seconds. I need answers. I need everybody to have an opinion that they have found it in justification. Alright, nicely done. Nicely done, nicely done. It's always nice when you can have a discussion and not worry about being right, but worry about thinking. I think that's important. The fun part about this class, we have to people turn on right now, I swear to God. Last story of where we're going. Now, the fun part about a class like this is the more you learn the material, the more you know, the more these kinds of questions are enjoyable to grapple with. So don't be surprised if going forward there's a lot more questions that ask you to like, just think. Just engage, right? The whole study of history doesn't always have right and wrong answers. Right? Like we all agree Hitler was bad. Right? We all agree slavery was bad. But like a class like A-Push gives you the opportunity to like, other than those things that are considered absolutes, to really like meander your way through what you interpret as the most important versions of these events. So I want to hear from you guys. What do you think? At what point was the Revolutionary War inevitable, unavoidable, was going to happen? Talk to me.
I think when all the colonists were united on the same opinion of how they felt the British having control over them.
Well, that never happened. The colonists are never united on the same opinion, so that can't be the answer. Also, it's not specific enough. Talk to me.
When Britain started making a lot of armies and making a navy.
Oh, okay. So when the military shows up, then the war is unavoidable. That's reasonable. That's reasonable. I don't disagree. What do you think? And then what do you think? Go.
Oh, well, we talked about the common sense and the Identifies.
Okay.
The whole thing that happened with them, and like once those ideas were put out there, it was kind of irreversible for them to like not know how things are working, and like it'd be no point for them to go back to the way it was.
Sure.
They already have like, oh, we can do it on our own type of mentality.
Okay, good. Right? That once Common Sense is published and the king rejects the olive branch tradition, at that point, you can't go back. That's reasonable. Yes, and then yes. Shmuel, go for it.
I said that the Revolutionary War was inevitable when there is taxes placed on the colonists, which caused them to rebel, and that's when like a lot of the colonists felt the need to like separate from Britain.
Okay. So it was the whole like new taxation policy in the first place. The end of salutary neglect, you'd say. That's reasonable. What do you think?
I would say that after the Intolerable Acts were passed, I think that that's when it kind of became inevitable, just because when the taxes were passed, the colonies had mentioned that they would stop whatever they were doing as long as they stopped taxing them, they would get rid of the British troops.
Yeah.
But I think as soon as like they shut down Boston Harbor and they shut down Boston in general, I think that at that point the colonists felt that it wasn't only an attack on their economy, it was an attack on their lifestyle, who they are as people.
Their way of life, their identity.
And it was kind of like you can't suppress that identity, and I think after that their just mindsets were so geared towards being so different from Britain that they just wanted nothing to do with it.
Deep. You stole my answer, which is kind of messed up. I appreciate that. Somebody in first period blew my mind. They were like, from colonization? It was not Fernando. I wish. He already has one for the year. We're good. They said from the very beginning, from the first day of colonization, it was inevitable. That because they left England in the first place, it was only a matter of time until they were far enough away and developed enough of their own identity that it was inevitable. And I thought that was a pretty deep way of looking at it. Because, kind of a bold statement, but that's kind of the fun part about these opinion questions is you're not wrong as long as you have something to back up what it is you say and why you say it. Anybody else want to chime in with their opinion? Nobody wants to say it was, for example, the Quartering Act? Because once we introduced the idea of soldiers living presently in, kind of what's happening over here, but you didn't say the Quartering Act, so use your SFI. Nobody else has an opinion? Stanford, what do you think? You're a smart man. You have opinions. I heard you issue a lot of opinions. How are you smart ones? Oh, look at him using A-push language. When the British introduced parliamentary sovereignty. Why is that the end, Stanford?
Because it basically took the power from the colonial assemblies.
Ah. So I have, that's a good point. I have two theories that I want to pose to you guys. Two theories. And they go off of that idea and that idea. So let's do a quick review. A quick review from where we were on Thursday of last. Thursday's a long time ago. As you guys at the beginning of the day, it's forever and a day ago. Where did we end off on Thursday? We got up to a very specific point. Yeah. The first Continental Congress. This is where we left off. And why is this first Continental Congress formed? Why did the colonists wake up one day like, you know, we should go to, people like more meetings, I want to go to more meetings. I hate meetings. I don't ever want to go to more meetings. So why? Why did they all come together and say we're going to have this Congress, this decision-making body? What is the event that sparks it? Well, guys, this is the stuff that you have to know well. It has to be muscle memory, otherwise we're never going to build on our knowledge in a way that's meaningful. Who has a thought? What's the event that caused this? Mel's, you remember?
No, I just remember the people though.
Okay. What causes this? Kevin Scott. You don't remember it. Go ahead.
I think it's a bit of a wild guess, but I think like the Boston Massacre might have started something.
Close, but no. No. Intolerable acts. Good. Let's just take a shot. The intolerable acts are what caused the first Congress. Now let's take a step back. What causes the intolerable acts? Why does the British put this crazy new the Boston Tea Party? Ah, there we go. Now we're thinking. This is better for a Monday afternoon. Yeah, Nieto. And what causes the Boston Tea Party? The Tea Act. Yeah, there we go. Yeah, Tea Act, Boston Tea Party. And remember we talked about how the Tea Act actually lowers taxes. People are still pissed off. So it demonstrates a lot of what's happening here. So at this point, I'm going to agree with Daniel, which pains me to say that, because I love when a kid makes a point that I was going to make, because it takes my thunder, but it's a good problem to have, is that this is the no turning back point. Because, is it the first time there's a tax on the colonies? No, tax, is it the first time there's a little more control in the colonies? No, but it's the first time that the British policy attacks colonial assemblies. It attacks the colonists' ability to govern themselves via their legislature, which goes to your bigger picture issue, that it's the idea of parliamentary sovereignty and taking power away from the colonial assemblies that causes the whole problem in the first place. So short term, you're right. Bigger picture, long term, you're right. Unless your opinion is different, in which case you're right as well. Everybody's right. Give yourself a round of applause for being right today. And the only time you're going to be right today, which is nice. Which is nice. So, what is unique about this first Continental Congress? What do we know about these? How many colonies show up? What are they trying to do? Give me some of the details, the SFI of the first Continental Congress. 1213. Who doesn't show up? Freaking Georgia. Yeah, you make Georgia? Bro, same. Don't worry, in the Civil War, a Union general's going to burn down the whole state of Georgia. It's going to be amazing. And then most of South Carolina, too. It's going to be the best day of the year. Good. 1213, are they set up to be a government? No, right? They're just coming together because they're pissed off about this, and they set out their Declaration of Rights and grievances, saying, hey, we're British, we got rights, we're people, we deserve representation, stop taxing us like that. And then they kind of disband, they go away. Because they're not set up to stick together, they're set up just to make their complaint, to put their complaint on paper, and to move on with their lives. I just need to make sure that we're all on the same page for this, because as long as we understand this piece, then the next parts of it make a little more sense. So today we'll talk about declaring and winning independence. Because it's not just declaring independence, you got to then earn your independence, right? Like, I'm sure you guys, how many of you guys are going to turn 18 in the next year? Next year, year and a half. Right? You're going to be all excited, like, hey, tell your parents, like, man, I'm an 18-year-old man now. I'm going to come home whenever I feel like it. And what's your mom going to say? Not when you live under my roof. Hell no. I tried that my 18th birthday. It didn't go very well. Yeah, I moved out a week later, never looked back. Now, sorry, Mom. She's a lovely lady. She couldn't live very long. Now, being independent is different than, like, being independent. Right? What does it take in life to be independent today? You guys think, you as individuals, what does it take to be independent? You got money, yeah, you got to pay your own bills, yeah, what else? Your own place? Oh, check this guy out. A little pad, right? Living in a studio.
Self-sufficiency.
Self-sufficiency, yeah, right? There's other parts though too. What about like, am I independent? No, not really. Not really. Can I pay my own bills? Absolutely. Right? Am I self-sufficient? Absolutely. But like, if I still communicate with my wife in a way, whereas like if we have plans, like she wins. Right? That's the way it works. Happy wife, happy life. Right? Being truly independent is like you don't have to rely on anybody for anything. You don't need their approval. You don't need them to check your decision. You're just a grown-ass man or woman doing your own thing. But it's important to understand that once you declare independence, it doesn't mean that you are in fact independent, but rather you declared it. Good for you, right? Like I declare a lot of things. I declared that I have a six-pack by now. It hasn't happened, right? But I declared it. So we'll talk about this new nation and its ideology. This is super important, guys. The ideological roots, where the ideas of the colonies and then the country comes from. Prompt is here. Can I have you read it for us, Kevin Scott, with your big man voice?
Evaluate the
Louder, Kevin Scott.
I
Highlight of my day every day.
Evaluate the relative significance of differing causes for American independence.
Beautiful. Take a minute with your partner. Talk about this prompt. What would you have to do in order to be successful with this prompt? Just give me your phone, please. Think you're slick. You're not. Thanks, bro. And I took it from you on Friday? Man. All right. So I want you to talk to your partner. What two things will you have to do well in order to successfully ATFP? 1 minute, go. Type it. What do you have to do? What do you have to do? What do you have to do? Ready? All right, so that's this wording.
Oh, is this one?
It's a different prompt, but same wording. So 2 years ago, the prompt was, I used this wording today on purpose because I'm going to introduce you more and more to what College Board is asking specifically. 2 years ago, the DBQ was evaluate the relative significance of differing causes, just like that, but for the growing U.S. role in the world from 1865 to 1900. So what it's asking you is like, why did the U.S. get imperialistic? But it's asking you in a messed up way because the College Board sucks. So I'll use that same wording because it's asking you the same thing, but it's asking you for a different type of event. So we have to do 2 things for this prompt. What's the first thing, Stansbury?
What?
What's the first thing you have to do to successfully ATFP here?
I don't know.
Yes, you do. Lopez. What do you have to do? There's 2 things. I asked you to talk about it for 1 minute. There's 2 things you guys have to do. What's the first? Don't overthink it. It's right in front of you. Explain the different causes for what? For American independence. So what are the different causes? Why? So you can tell, what are some causes? List me out some causes right now. Different ideas. That's not a cause, that's a big old phrase. Taxes. Control. What else? Ooh, the Enlightenment. British troops. The Boston. Sure, all these causes. But if you just said these are the 5 causes, would you have ATFP? No, because you tell me which causes are more important than others. So like in this type of writing, it has to be what's called argumentative, which means you're going to say like, yes, there's these 3 causes, but this cause is the most significant because X, Y, and Z. I just want to make sure that you're just paying attention to the language of these prompts so that you're really comfortable and really confident being like, yeah, I can answer whatever the hell they ask me. Because you don't want to get tripped up on the wording if you know the content. I hate when that happens. When kids are like, oh, I understood the material, but I didn't know what the question was asking me, so I didn't answer it. Right? I know, which is why we have all year to fix that problem, because it's a problem that exists. It's because the College Board tests are written for middle and upper class white people. Right? And nobody in this room is that. But, yeah, you are. That's absolutely true. Ryan Lopez looks pretty white. But, what the idea being that if we can tackle the language piece, then we let our content knowledge shine, and you'll have plenty of content knowledge. Cool. Let us dive in there. Oh, it's back there with your sweat. All right, so here's your outline. Lead up. We'll lead up to declaring independence. We will declare independence. We will win independence, and then we're free. We free. Now what? And then the hard stuff begins. Because you're like, okay, cool, we got rid of the British. Now it's time to start our country from scratch. And everyone's like, wait, y'all know how to run a country? I don't know how to run a country. You know how to run a country? We got to build this entire system from scratch. And spoiler alert, the first attempt is going to suck. But that's for Thursday. That's for Thursday. So let's talk first about some dates. What's our key date for today's lecture, do you guys think? If it's all about this, what do you guys think is the important date for today's lecture? 1776. Yes, why is that date important? Yeah, they declare independence. So then why then, and then what would you guys say starts the Revolutionary War? People usually say this, right? That once you declare independence, the British and the Americans fight, and then, you know, the war goes on, and then next thing you know, they're independent. Reasonable? That's normally how things work. You declare war, and then you have war. Make sense? So then why then is our, in my opinion, our military conflict beginning in 1775? That's crazy. I'm talking about April of 1775, so a year and 3 months. A year and 3 months before we declare independence, the war technically has, quote unquote, begun. Now, I'll explain to you what happens in this place, Lexington and Concord. The specifics don't necessarily matter. What matters, though, is kind of the way that the British and the colonists both see the situation. So Lexington and Concord are 2 small towns right outside Boston. Here's Boston on my map. There's Boston Harbor. As you guys know, it's shut down because of the Intolerable Acts. And Lexington is here and Concord is here. Okay, so they're just a little bit inland from Boston. Now, the British royal governor, Gage, he sends a small number of troops, 700 British soldiers, to Lexington and Concord with 2 goals. Goal 1, arrest the rebel leaders, these people that are leading the rebellion, these patriots, like the Sam Adams and John Adamses of the world, right? That are like pushing the Sons of Liberty, if you will. All these guys that are pushing rebellion. That's their first goal, arrest them. Second goal, confiscate all their weapons, all their arms, all their cannons, all their gunpowder, all their war materials. And if you accomplish both those 2 goals, we'll put down this rebellion, it'll all be over, we can all go home. So take a minute and talk to your partner, please. Knowing those are the 2 goals, to arrest these leaders, to confiscate their weapons, and if you do those 2 things, the rebellion is over. If those are the 2 goals of the British, what does that reveal about the way the British are viewing this problem and the way the colonists are viewing this situation? Okay? 2 minutes. Dive in, talk to the person next to you. I want to hear about it. Go. Go. That's part of it. What else? He would represent the rest of the leaders, and that would stop me. Yes. I remember the map I showed you guys on Thursday last week that all the troops were just in Boston, showing that the British think the rebellion was just in Boston. Did you get the? You were able to get the document, okay?
Yeah, yeah.
Spilling water in your backpack, making a mess. Right? All right, I'm gonna stop you guys there. I heard some good responses. Let me hear first from Leslie. What do you think? What is this, like, knowing this is the situation, what does that say?
I feel that the British, they feel like just by arresting the rebel leaders, they will overpower them.
Okay.
And
Sure. Yes, build on that, please.
I feel like they don't see the immensity of how big the issue truly is.
Say that again louder.
They don't see the immensity of how truly big the issue is. Like how deeper it is. I feel like it's more of they see as a reward. That's how they're trying to solve it when it's actually technically, but to the fact that all the colonies came together with the representatives.
Interesting. So what she's saying is, like, the British look at it as just a little military problem. If we just stop that, then everything goes away. Without realizing the problem's actually deeper rooted than that. The problem is more ideological than it is just military. Good point. Good point. Go.
I was gonna say, kind of to like add on to her point, just to give more detail. I think that it's kind of, they think that it's extinguishable just through like removing the leaders, because they think that only these leaders have those corrupt, quote unquote corrupt ideas, and they're corrupting the colonies. And
Yeah. They don't realize it's a personal problem for a lot of people. That if we get rid of these 5 or 6 colonial leaders, then we'll just get rid of the whole problem. Good. So from the British side of things, somebody first period compared it to like a parent when their kid's like throwing a fit at the grocery store, right? And the parent's like, just shut up, right? Like, get over it. Like, no, you can't have that candy. I'm sorry, it's 10 in the morning. Right? It's bad for you. It's gonna rot your teeth. Like, we have to go home now, right? Whereas the kid throwing the fit, the colonists, are like, no, this is a really big problem. It's not about the Snickers bar, Mom. It's a way bigger issue than that. It's about the right? Like, I deserve representation in my food choices. You're not consulting me on what we're shopping for. And now you see the problem. So whatever happens, you guys all heard the Paul Revere story? Yes, maybe, sort of. He sees the British ships coming to land. He and his buddy William Dawes, they take off on their horses. What are they yelling? The British are coming. Guess what? They're all British. Think about it. The British are like, yeah, cool. Which British people? We're all British. Yeah, so he likely did not say the British are coming. He probably said the Redcoats are coming for the military. But Paul Revere becomes famous over this and the Boston Massacre engraving. But we never heard about his buddy William Dawes. That's messed up. All right, there's 2 of them, and they're both riding their horses to go warn the militia leaders that this is happening. Paul Revere's famous, and we never heard about William Dawes. Maybe they're on the same horse. I don't know. Maybe Paul Revere is the driver of the horse, and William Dawes is holding on behind him for dear life. I don't know, man. So anyway, they warn the militia. The militia is able to move their weapons and hide them somewhere else. A skirmish breaks out. A small skirmish breaks out. The first bloodshed of the actual revolution takes place. 8 Minutemen or 8 colonial militia members die. 1 British soldier is wounded. But you can say that it's called the shot heard around the world because it kicks off the American Revolutionary War. Yeah. And then massive ramifications. But keep in mind, we're still a year and 3 months away from declaring independence, which is kind of crazy to think about. So this Lexington and Concord skirmish, or miniature conflict, it's a little battle, not very major, not a whole lot going on, nothing comes of it. But this little skirmish kicks off a series of conflicts that all take place before America actually declares independence. In the next year, you'll see fighting erupt between the British soldiers and colonial militias around Boston, like Lexington and Concord, around New York City, around Charleston in South Carolina, and even in Quebec in British Canada. And it's this conflict, this is an important step, it's this conflict that creates the Second Continental Congress. So the first one's caused by the Intolerable Acts. The second one is a little more drastic. It's caused by British military armed conflicts. It is at this point that King George declares that the colonists are, in quotation marks, they're his words, the colonists are in open rebellion. They are in a state of rebellion. They are rebelling against the crown in a formal fashion. It's kind of funny how that works. That King George tells the colonists that they're in rebellion before the colonists tell the rest of the world they're in rebellion. Think about it. We haven't declared independence yet. We have not created a system in which we're saying, yes, we're independent, we're fighting for it. King George declares the colonists in rebellion before the colonists even declare themselves in rebellion. Some other examples of small early battles, the Battle of Bunker Hill, which takes place right outside Boston, shows the British troops that maybe these guys are a little tougher than we think they were. We thought they were. Oh, whoa, whoa, whoa. What happened over there? You guys see that? That's crazy. It's a ghost. There it goes. And even though we have this group together, we have all this military stuff going on, colonists are dying at the hands of the British soldiers, the Second Continental Congress puts out the Olive Branch Petition. So it's important that we understand this comes out of the Second Continental Congress. Now, how many of you guys are at least a little bit familiar with the Bible? A little bit? Kind of, sort of? Yeah? Destiny's like, the what? Yeah, same. Where does the olive branch, what does the olive branch symbolize, biblically speaking? What does the olive branch symbolize? Nope, not olive oil, but olive oil is good. It's good for your heart. It's good for healthy fats.
Peace.
Peace. The olive branch symbolizes peace. Now, I'll give extra bonus points to the person other than Josue who can tell me where that comes from in the Bible. What story, what idea, what that. Anybody know? Anybody know? Take a shot. Yep, 3 little pigs. That's it. No. Anybody know? Because if I haven't been to church in like 12 years, and I can give the answer. So, nope, not Adam and Eve. Not Adam and Eve. Genesis is a book. Nope. What story? It is in Genesis. What story? What parable or story?
Wait, what?
11, 12. Noah.
Noah and the ark.
Noah and the ark.
Yeah. Because God warns Noah. God warns Noah, hey, I'm about to flood the world. Save yourself and save freaking 2 of every animal on a ship. Right? We got lions and tigers and bears. Right? Oh shit, we brought 2 male bears by accident. But then God floods the world, and then God sends a dove. I don't know where the dove came from because there was, never mind. A dove with an olive branch to symbolize like a fresh start. He says, I'll never do that again. We'll go back to the way things were, fresh start, peace, etc. So clean slate. So the name of this olive branch petition is intentional. Because they're offering England the same thing. A clean slate. And the olive branch petition says something very simple. It says the thing I asked you about on Thursday. Can we just go back to the way things were? And when the colonists say back to the way things were, what are they referring to? What are they referring to? Salutary neglect. Good job, Stansbury. They're saying, can we just go back to the salutary neglect time? We have no problem trading with you. Mercantilism, we're all good. Remember all the texts I had you guys read on Thursday when they're pissed off about taxes? They say, go ahead and regulate our commerce. That's fine. Just don't come here and regulate our internal taxes. They're saying, let's go back to that. All right, Navigation Acts, cool, no problem. We'll ship all of our goods to you. No big thing. But let's just go back to the salutary neglect period in which you left us alone everywhere else. So it's a good question. What does that reveal about the colonial mindset? It reveals that the colonists are willing, even at that crazy late point, they are willing at that point to go back to the way things were. Now, there's conflicting ideas on this. in that as soon as they send the olive branch expedition, they're already like planning to fight a war over it. So how authentic was the olive branch expedition? I don't know. Sometimes we do things just to say that we can say we did, we tried. Also, a historical rumor, King George never opens it. He says, I'm not going to even negotiate with you until you stop your rebellion. Again, demonstrating how these two sides are viewing this incredibly differently. How the colonists are still trying to engage as if they're an equal member in British society, and King George is like, man, F them kids. However, as early as early 1776, again, still before declaring independence, Spain and France begin shipping war supplies to the colonists. Spain and France begin sending war supplies to the colonists. King George rejects the olive branch expedition in August of 1775. And that kind of leaves the Second Continental Congress at a weird place. What do you do at this point? Right? He's rejected your offer. Can you just go back to like being... You're kind of at this in-between point where the British aren't going to back down, the colonists aren't going to back down. They're both kind of just stuck staring at each other. Now, the Second Continental Congress is different from the first in one really, really key issue. And that it is set up as a governing body. It is set up as a governing body. Whereas the first Continental Congress was set up for one reason, because they're pissed off with the Intolerable Rights. The Second Continental Congress is legitimately set up to run the colonies, to act as a governing body. And that's a big difference. Because you can make an argument right now that this is already declaring independence. By setting up your own intercolonial government, you've already declared independence, you just haven't said so yet. Because they've now set up a national government to run the whole war effort, even though they still have not yet declared independence. So it's a governing body, whereas the first one was just a protest group that was upset about the Intolerable Acts. Unlike the first one, all 13 colonies show up. Good job, Georgia finally shows. What's up, guys? I know. Pissed off at Georgia. Don't worry. We'll burn them down later, I promise. Sherman's March to the Sea. It's going to be awesome. But let's look at this as a continuity for a second, an A-push continuity. When's the first time the colonies all tried to get together? Albany Plan, right? And like what, 7 colonies showed up? And they were like, oh yeah, we're here. And then what's the next time they try to come together? What? Before the first Continental Congress, there's an in-between where 9 colonies show up. Come on. 5th period. The Stamp Act Congress. When they come together, they push out, yes. And then the first Continental Congress, and then the second Continental Congress. So finally, we go from like 7 to 9 to 12, and now all 13 are there, and they are ready to conduct business. Now, while the Second Continental Congress is in session, a bunch of stuff happens. A couple important battles happen after Lexington conquered. The olive branch expedition is sent. The olive branch expedition is rejected by the king proclaiming them in rebellion. And then Britain passes the Prohibitory Act, which prohibits any British business from buying or selling their goods in the colonies. Basically, like they're cut off. They're cut off economically from Great Britain by the Prohibitory Act. While this is taking place, the Second Continental Congress organizes an army. Question for you guys, is organizing an army an act of war? I don't know. Do they have the right to have their own army?
Yeah.
Why? They're still part of Great Britain. Was the British Army not sufficient? They have not yet declared independence. So, they need an army for them. Okay, cool. So they make their army, they appoint George Washington to be in charge of the army. Any ideas why George Washington? He's a good leader, right? Because he had war experience, especially in war. Yeah, and his dumbass just shows up to the Second Continental Congress in his military uniform, like a weirdo. Right, like Anthony Otten walking in the place, like, right? Like he just shows up in his military uniform, and everyone's like, I guess that guy's in charge of the army because he's dressed for the occasion. Like, geez, you don't need normal clothes, George? What's wrong with you? Yeah. And while this is taking place, this is important for later, I promise. The Second Continental Congress urges each state to make their own state constitution. Hey, Virginia, make your own state figure out how to run Virginia as an independent state. Hey, Maryland, you look pretty Marylandish. Make a state constitution. Hey, New York, make a state constitution. Hey, Georgia. Oh, Georgia, you came. Nice of you to join us. Hey, Massachusetts. Hey, Pennsylvania, make your own state constitution. I'm telling you that now because we're going to look at some of them and some of the problems with this on Thursday in class. But in May of 1776, Virginia becomes kind of the first state to declare their own rights as separate from Great Britain. It's kind of funny, looking at it once we know history well, that before the country declares independence, like some of the individual colonies have already begun that process. And you'll look at Virginia's text of their Declaration of Rights in just a second. So all of this takes place, and then, and only then, do the colonies decide in July of 1776 to declare their independence. So go ahead and turn your page, please. Turn your page. Good job today so far, guys. You guys are killing it. You guys are killing it. I have Virginia's Declaration of Rights. Keeping in mind, this happens before the Declaration of Independence. I want you to read it for two things. First thing, what ideas are present? What's the stuff that they're like really trying to say they believe in? And second question, where do you see Enlightenment influence? Where do you see Enlightenment philosophy or Enlightenment thought in this text? I'll give you 5 to read it and respond. I'll give you a minute to talk about it. And while you're doing that, I'll also be passing out your SAQs from the last test. Please don't get distracted. Look at your score. Look at your feedback later. And get into that text. 5 minutes. Go for it. You're reading. Bless you. Bless you. Sneeze again and see what happens. Virginia's Declaration of Rights is vital. Oh. Robot.
Oh, it's me?
Yeah. You. You're reading for main ideas. What do they believe in, and where do we see Enlightenment influence? Look, but you've been taking your shit. I don't have it. Three and a half minutes. What are the main ideas? Where do we see Enlightenment influence? What are the key ideas that Virginia is believing in, and where do you see Enlightenment influence? I know. Virginia is also the same place that gives us Jefferson, Washington, Madison, the best in America's best ever political people. It isn't. It isn't. So you, Felix, bro, you have a hard time making your own. Read. Words are hard. I know. No excuse world. I know. And guess what? Still got that 5. 30 seconds. Come on, guys. Key ideas and Enlightenment influence. All right. So take 2. Sure. Take 2. Talk to people next to you. What are the key ideas that Virginia is rooting their civilization on? And where do we see enlightened influence? 2 minutes, go. Dive in. 2 minutes. 2 minutes. 2 minutes. 2 minutes. Natural rights, property. Property. Liberty, property. Yeah. Power is given to people. The best thing is all right. 8 or so seconds. Wrap it up. Good. So talk to me, please. Justin, I'll pick on you first. What are some of the key ideas that Virginia identifies in their own Declaration of Rights? Beautiful. Power comes from the people. The government exists because people put it there. Absolutely. Like that a lot. Like that a lot. Michael, what else?
Natural rights.
Okay. People have natural rights. What are those natural rights? Life, liberty,
Pursuit of happiness.
property, pursuit of happiness. Sure, sure. Good. And what's the government's role in this natural rights conversation?
They protect.
Good. The government should be there to protect those natural rights. Good, 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 good. I like that. I like that. Doctor?
The government's for the common benefit, so it's better for the benefit.
Ah, the government's supposed to be there for the common good. We haven't seen that phrase for a while. When's the last time we saw that phrase? City on a hill or Mayflower Compact. Sure. Good. Good. I see you guys. Look at you building connections to early on, third day of school. Shmuel, what else? What else is Virginia insistent on? Okay. Reasonable. Rachel. What's up? Coming back? Cool. Emily Hernandez is in office, we'll be right back. Cool. Daniel, yes, go ahead. And then Araceli.
Something like big, I'm not sure where, like direction, but I'm not sure if it's common sense, but the separation of powers.
Ah, separation of powers. That last piece is pretty important. Section 5, that the legislative, the lawmaking powers, and the executive powers shouldn't be the same person or the same body. Then if we're gonna have power, it should be split up. You know where that actually comes from? Not common sense. That comes from Montesquieu. Yeah, it's enlightenment. That's a Montesquieu. That's a Montesquieu thing. Good. Good. So let's talk about what enlightenment ideas we see in this text. Antonio, what's one of the enlightenment ideas we see in this text?
One of them is kind of like inherent rights, though.
Good. Inherent or natural rights. Rights that all people are born with. That's a good one. That's very John Lockean, John Locke-esque. Mel's, what else?
The pursuit of happiness and safety.
Yeah, that people have the right to pursue happiness. That's what we're supposed to live for. Good. Good, Brian, what else? Say it again, just in case. Yeah, separation of powers, enlightenment thing. That's good. I said it, you said it. Yes, and then yes. Go ahead.
The right to reform, alter, or abolish.
Ah, that's a big one. Snaps on Angel for that one. Yeah, that people have a right to reform or abolish their government when their government's not serving their needs. That's a huge one. Another one? That was it? Cool. That's a good one. Nicely done. So it's fair to say that this Virginia Declaration of Rights is very heavy in Enlightenment thinking. Now, look at that first really important line. Who's created equal? Yeah, all men, man. Oh, that's great. Yvonne was so mad in first period. She's like, this text making me mad. I was like, yeah, you know, it's 250 years ago. It's important to be mad at these things 250 years ago. But yes, very mad online. Yvonne was mad. So, all men are equal. Now, where is this coming from? What state does this come from? What colony? Virginia. What do we know about Virginia? Tobacco, cash crops, and slaves. Wait a second. But it says all men. Read it again. Maybe I say all. No? It doesn't say all white men. It doesn't say all non-African men. All men are by nature equally free and independent and have certain rights. Woo. Interesting. So how can a slaveholder sit down and write this perspective? Yep, slaves aren't men. Slaves are, in fact, property. And the idea of property is it is just as protected as natural rights, life, liberty, and property. But let's talk about what the role of this revolution is on slavery. Let's talk about it. So, in 1775, 1 year before America declares independence, there's a very important development called Lord Dunmore's Proclamation. Lord Dunmore's Proclamation. Now, Lord Dunmore, he's a British general. You with me so far? He's a Brit, and he says in Virginia, he says explicitly, any slave who escapes his master and joins the British Army is free. Remember that from last year. Any slave who escapes their master and comes to the British Army to support the British in this conflict is free. So now all of a sudden, what do you have slaves doing in the South? Yeah, escape. Word travels fast on slave plantations. Word travels fast with word of mouth. They're like, oh my. So now all of a sudden, this whole slave population throughout Virginia, North Carolina, South Carolina is aware that A, a conflict is coming, and B, if I escape to the British troops, I'm a free man. So now who do the slaves want to win this war? British. Yeah, absolutely British. Hell yeah. But what this does is very important for you guys to identify for support for the war. Now, Southern slaveholders, in general, who were like anti-revolution before, what are those called? People that are anti-revolution, what are they called? No, anti-revolution. Loyalists, right? All these British, excuse me, all these loyalists in the South who own slaves, as soon as they find out that the British are trying to free their slaves, overnight, they become patriots. Take a minute. What does that reveal about society? 1 minute, go for it.
That's the big coincidence.
Yeah, go. Borrow my shirt. I'll see your shirt. All right, let me stop you guys there. So, I heard from my front, Esther. Esther, what does that reveal about Southern society at the Revolutionary War?
That they do things that
Yeah, like to many people in the South, the Revolution becomes a war of like convenience. What's going to be better for me? What's going to be better for my status? Now, this map is important though, because this is going to be the beginning of a very important divide in society that's going to carry us all the way through the first semester. My states that are in red, so I see Connecticut, Rhode Island, Massachusetts, New Hampshire, and Vermont. What is this region called? What is this region of the colonies called? Come on, guys. New England. The states in red, during the Revolutionary War, end slavery. They put their money where their mouth is, and they, into their state constitutions we just talked about, into their actual state constitutions, they abolished slavery. During the war. My states that are in blue, so New York and Pennsylvania, what region are they from? The middle colonies, right? They don't abolish slavery immediately, but they do what's called gradual emancipation or gradual abolition. Which means that, like, yes, slavery's not dead tomorrow, but like we're ending the new acquisition of slaves. So if you were a slave now and you have children, your children will be free. Making sense so far? And the states that are in green, they don't touch slavery. And here we have our entire southern states that are still embracing the idea of slavery. So I say this to you because what this shows me is that our states that are in the northern regions are using the Declaration of Independence to have them rethink their idea of manhood. Rethinking their ideas of freedom. Right? If we're going to fight this war for freedom, who are we to own people? Meanwhile, our southern states are going to look at it differently and say, we're fighting this war to keep our property. Because natural rights means life, liberty, and property. And therefore, since this war is about life, liberty, and property, we can keep our property. So even in this revolutionary, I know, it's crazy. You guys laugh now, but it's 1776. Even in this Revolutionary War conflict, we're seeing two different views of what freedom means for those in the north versus those in the south. Yes, Daniel?
So we see a stronger tie to slavery than we did before? Or we
No, but yes, kind of. The stronger tie will come in about 20 years with the invention of the cotton gin. So all these areas that are forming tobacco, rice, sugar, indigo, all these cash crops, they're going to double down on slavery. They're going to invest more in slavery because their economy is already so wrapped up in cash crops that in their opinion, it's too late to back out. So it's important that you understand, like, in the context of the Revolutionary War, some northern states abolished slavery. And that this movement for abolition, for getting rid of slavery, is really inspired by the Declaration of Independence, which says all men are created equal.
Is this why we kind of see like conflicting ideas between the South and the North? Because they're like, oh, like you're still stuck on slaves.
Yep. 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 Now, it's important that we don't think that the North is this beautiful place for black people, because even those people that are free in areas where there's no slavery have very limited civil rights. African Americans still can't vote, still can't hold office, still can't work most jobs, but at least in the northern and New England states, they are not considered property. So by 1776, this Second Continental Congress is actually running the colonies. They're serving as an informal or non-official national government for the colonies as a whole. However, most colonists are still kind of on the fence and undecided. I like to draw out like a spectrum. I'll put it up here for you guys. So you have all of your society is on this line, and 20% of it is strong patriots. This 20% is strong loyalists. And this 60% is in the middle, and they're kind of just like, we'll see what happens. So most of society is undecided on the idea of independence by 1775, 1776. But you have this is the louder part. They may only be 20%, but they're very vocal, organized 20%. Sons of Liberty, Boston Tea Party, boycotts, committees of correspondence, right? Whereas this side is kind of the quiet side because they don't want to get yelled at and tarred and feathered by these guys. However, the book Common Sense plays a huge impact in shifting some of this group this way. Let's talk about why. Thomas Paine is, for the most part, a failed businessman, a failed writer. He's America's original T-Pain. I love that. I know. Thank you for laughing at my terrible joke. Wait till we get to America's original Warren G. Every year, fewer and fewer kids get that joke. And he publishes Common Sense in 1776. And the way he does it is he writes it in very approachable, everyday language. Very approachable, very readable, so that everybody in the colonies can understand what he has to say. Now, we already know from last week that the colonies are a very literate society. They can all read. But that doesn't mean they can all read really well. So rather than publish a bunch of stuff like what you just read, Virginia's Declaration of Rights is kind of like old legalistic language. Power derived from the people, and on and on. Rather than publish a bunch of stuff like this, Nieto, what Thomas Paine does instead is he publishes a book that's very readable, very approachable, and it appeals to everybody. Let me tell you why. He gives economic justifications for independence, for those people that are worried about money. He gives political justification for those people that are worried about representation. He gives social justifications for those people that are worried about like still being British and being tied to the British society socially. He gives scientific reasons, logical reasons. He gives all kinds of reasons why America should be independent, and he does so in very readable language so that every colonist can find something. Guys, it's just the hallway. I know you're excited to see people. We'll go out to the march now if you want to. Every colonist can find something in the book that resonates with what they're worried about independence-wise. And what that reveals to me is that the revolution is really a movement of everyday people. If we're going to use this book that's written at an everyday people level and do so to reach them and move them, question for you guys. If the colonies were only worried about the elite, the rich, would they have written a book like Common Sense that would appeal to everyday people? No. So it demonstrates that the revolutionary movement is broader than just rich, elite, everyday people. So I'm going to have you read a short chunk out of it. Turn your page. A short chunk. It's long. It goes basically the colonial version of going viral. It publishes more books per capita, meaning per person, than any book in the colonies in American history, except the Bible, which is crazy, right? Obviously, you can sell more books now because there's more people in America, but on a percentage of how many people in the colonies bought it, it sells more books than anybody in American history except the Bible. So, I'm going to have you read it, and all I need on your right-hand column is what are his arguments? What are his arguments? So, is he giving an argument that's economic? If so, put a little E and tell me what his argument is. Is it a political argument? Is it a social argument? So after 6 minutes, I should be able to see a nice list of all the arguments you identified that Paine gives for independence. You're going to take 6 minutes. You're going to read. You check to make sure that we're getting the right arguments out of there we should be. 6 minutes, go. Yes. You can't do it. Fine. Just go. Both go. I don't want you to miss lecture, so maybe. See how you're reading. What are the arguments he gives in favor of independence? The arguments about 3.5 or something. It's a good read. He gives a lot of good arguments, a lot of good reasons. We want to see as many identified as possible. Economic reasons, political reasons, social reasons. Do it. Like it. Like it. And you're great. What is it?
Oh, yeah.
Many reasons. What are their justifications? What is pain and think are the logical arguments for independence?
Can I go tell him to call me? I'm gonna leave with Miss Valerie.
That's fine. show of fingers, who needs a little more time to read? Cool. I'll give you another minute and a half or so. But you're reading Identifying Arguments. What are his arguments in favor of independence? Zero proof that you learned anything like that. Zero proof. They should have some down there. No, you don't have to. About 30 more seconds. All right. So go ahead and take 2 minutes with the person next to you and identify, like, what are some of the key arguments that Payne gives, and how does he support his argument? All right, 2 minutes diving into what it is that Payne thinks are reasons for independence. 2 minutes, go. Dive in, have a good chat about it.
One thing I found though, they're like it's not. They're like Britain though is not the only like country though that around Europe though. And they will actually have like conflict with one another though. Probably with like France, Spain, Germany, etc. But from that though, like, the colonies will actually have to take a cost. They have to actually like pay for it.
He literally says that in it. He literally says that in it.
No, it's like rivalry and
So why would we have a small island covering a whole big world? It doesn't make any logical sense. I need answers from everybody in this room. Kitty, what's up? All right, I'm gonna stop you guys there. Let's rattle this off as quickly as possible. Here's what are his arguments. Cortez will go to you for one. We'll do Ariely for one. We'll do Araceli for one, and Daniel for one. Cortez, go ahead. Good, economically. He says if we just keep trading only with Great Britain, that's not good for us. So those of you who are worried who we're going to trade with, I don't know, the rest of the world. Good one, I like that.
Britain conflicts ruin and affect America as well.
Hell yeah! Good job, that's a good one. European conflicts. If we stay part of Great Britain's empire, every time they go to war with somebody, which is how often? Pretty often. Then we're going to be dragged into this stupid ass conflict, and then that's going to ruin us as well, economically. Good. Good.
I'm not sure what category this.
That's okay. Some of them are just vague.
Yeah. I saw one that said that the distance between England and America serves as like a proof that God like that wasn't what God had planned for.
Yeah. They're so far away. It says in there, like, they send us a new law and it arrives 4 or 5 weeks later. We send our response and it arrives 4 or 5 weeks later. Like, there's no way to live a logistical, modern political life. Daniel, what else?
I have two. I think one is like, they talk about how absolutism like will always fail, and like how their religion sucks.
Yeah.
And this one very specific one. In I think the second one or the first one, they talk about how like America has become such a safe place for immigrants and like people who travel that why are you gonna leave them? Why are you gonna let them destroy all of that?
Diversity. Who does he say that the mother country of the colonies is? Europe, right? He's like, yeah, like we came from England in the first place, but now we have people from Germany, people from Ireland, people all these places. So like, we don't really have a mother country, we have a mother continent. So why should we be tied to one country if so much of our roots are from other places in Europe? Also size. That's a big one. That's an easy one. Because why is a small island governing a whole continent? That makes no sense. He says the sun doesn't revolve around the earth. We revolve around the sun. The big thing, the bigger body should have more attention paid to it. Am I missing any? How about just treatment? At the very beginning, right? That they've treated. Are you going to tell us that England's our mother country? Well, not even savages attack their own children. So why would then England be attacking us if this was our mother country? Yes, sir.
I was gonna say, like, I remember reading from the internet, there was this one line that served as motivation for the war, that they said, and like an island cannot rule a continent.
Yep. A small island has no business ruling an entire vast continent. Good. Good. So all in all, common sense plays a huge difference in convincing people that are kind of on the fence, kind of undecided, that there's a lot of reasons for independence. By June 7th of 76, a man at the Second Continental Congress named Richard Henry Lee of Virginia, he introduces a resolution or a vote that says we should at least begin to embrace the idea of declaring independence. Several days of debate later, Congress creates a committee. Of course, everything always happens in committees and groups. And that committee will then draft the Declaration of Independence. By about 1 month later, the Declaration is ready to go, ready to be produced, and it's published. The reaction is quite sudden. I enjoy this picture very much. It's a picture of crowds in New York City in celebration, toppling the statues that serve to exalt the king. This particular statue, I'm sure you read, was pulled down in New York City, was melted down into metal, turned into bullets, and then used to fire against the king's army. So it's kind of funny to use the king's own statue, turned into bullets, and use it against the British soldiers. Yeah. Yeah. Here we have the red coats, of course, and whatnot. So the Declaration is produced and published on July 4th of 1776. The committee to write it, Thomas Jefferson is given the job of chief writer. He's assisted by other people we should be familiar with by now. Ben Franklin is on the committee. John Adams is on the committee. Robert Livingston is on the committee. And Roger Sherman is on the committee. Roger Sherman specifically is a guy we'll hear again from on Monday of next week, which is his role. But it's important that we understand that the way the Declaration is structured is intentional. First, much like common sense does and Virginia's Declaration of Rights does, it uses natural rights, laws of nature. That people exist with these rights and the government's job is to support those rights. But it really spends a lot of time, in justifying their revolution. In showing that according to Enlightenment philosophy, we have the right to overthrow a government when the government's not serving our best interests. Yes, sir?
Would you say like that's also just like an enlightenment thing to have evidence? Because before
Yeah, Enlightenment philosophy is that you show your thinking. Absolutely. The idea that the phrase self-evident, meaning it should be obvious to everybody what's happening. All men are created equal. endowed with certain unalienable rights, life, liberty, and Jefferson changed his property from John Locke's theory, life, liberty, property, and he changed it to pursuit of happiness. Because he thinks all Americans should be able to pursue happiness whether they own property or not. And then what Jefferson does is he lists out all the complaints with the king. He did this, he did this, he did this, he sent his soldiers. He tried to inspire a slave rebellion, Lord Dunmore's proclamation. He taxed us without our consent. He refused our representation. He refused our olive branch tradition. We tried all these 75 things, and the king kept messing up. So I want to ask you, take a minute with the person next to you, why? Why is it significant and important to list specific grievances against King George? What are they doing by listing out all their problems they have with King George? 1 minute to dive in. Go for it. Go. Why? Yeah, good. Good word. Good word, Esther.
Why they shouldn't be a part of their I was gonna say just to forget
So I would. Oh, as in I thought because then it could also push more off, because then everybody would be like, yeah, they're right. Let's get this bread. That's it's very
Cool. I'll stop you guys there. Let me hear from Garcia. Talk to you, brother. Why is it significant that they list out all their specific problems? What do you think? You just sat there and just hung out? No thoughts? Good start. Give me an answer. Go for it.
It's kind of a why, like a form of justification why they're doing
Yeah, trying to justify why they're rebelling. That's important. That's important. To what audience, though? Yeah. If anything, this is the list of grievances to show to the rest of the world, specifically France and Spain, who we want help from, that we're not just a bunch of angry children throwing a fit. But we've tried X, we've tried Y, we've tried Z, we've tried them all over again, and yet the king kept coming back and doing all these other terrible things. So now you get a little more credibility on the world stage. That's the word I'm looking for. They're justifying their actions, and they're trying to do so with credibility. So they can credibly say, hey, we're in the right here. We are correct. It's England that is wrong. So as we go and ask France or Spain for support and for assistance, we can do so knowing that you explained why you broke up in the first place. Anybody ever been dumped before? Don't lie, it's okay. High school relationships don't matter, I promise. Michael, I'm sorry, bro. I'm here for you. So, when you get dumped, what's the first thing that you ask? Why? Can we still be friends? Nobody asked that shit. Get out of here. But that, am I right? Is not the next question always why? Why? And if it's a respectful relationship, that person should tell you, like, hey, you're freaking crazy. Right? Or you don't shower enough. Or, there's problems. So, what the colonists are doing is they're breaking up with King George, but they're telling the rest of the world why. Now, there's 3 important ideas that I want you to come away from this for Enlightenment philosophy and how that impacts the Enlightenment events. The first is Locke. Locke's argument that people have natural rights and the government's job is to protect those natural rights we see that in the very beginning of the Declaration. When in the course of human events it becomes on. Locke writes, people have life, liberty, property, and that all people should oppose tyranny or too much power in one person or group's hands. So Locke becomes the foundation for about 70% of the Declaration of Independence. And Locke's the easy one because you see life, liberty, pursuit, happiness, and very introductory words. But there's also 2 important characters that play a role as well. The second is Jean-Jacques Rousseau. Jean-Jacques Rousseau. And Rousseau's arguments, Enlightenment thinking-wise, again, these are 2 people that are not in the colonies, they're old Enlightenment thinkers. Rousseau argues that government exists as a social contract. that I have a relationship with my government, it's a contract. It is a legally binding contract. And what the government says they're going to do, they have to do, and the things I say I'm going to do, I have to do. For example, do we have the right to do everything in this country?
No.
No, right? We give away some rights. Why? Why do we give away the right to just stab people at will? Because for real, I want to stab people all the time. Chaos, right? We give away some of our liberty in exchange for order. Order, and it's a balance. Safety works too, though, right? Like, can I drive home at 120 miles an hour if I want to? No, I've given away that right. In exchange, the government helps guarantee that the roads are safe for people who want to drive 120 miles an hour.
Right.
So Rousseau's argument is that citizens have a social contract with their government. When their government's not holding up their end of the bargain, we should then cancel that contract and make a new one with a new government. And the third is just as important, arguably the most important, foundational argument of the American Republic, the American democracy, is Montesquieu's separation of powers. That you can't give all the power to one person or one group. The only way to check power is to give somebody else power.
You said this fails.
What's that?
You said this all fails the first time when you tried
The ideals are fantastic. The government they create is freaking atrocious. Because anytime a pendulum swings one way, what happens next? It goes back all the way. So they actually create a government with too little power. Because they're so scared of tyranny. We'll talk about that next week. And Thursday. Next time. On April. Ding, ding, ding. I guess you and shit. Wow. All right. So it's important you guys understand that, like, out of the Enlightenment come these philosophical ideas, but they're just ideas. And it's through the spread of ideas, through like the Atlantic exchanges, through all those salons I told you about, those saloons of bars and people and thinking and literacy and written word and community correspondence, that all these Enlightenment ideas spread, and they then influence the American Revolution in a very significant way. And it all stems back to the idea of, frankly, representation. If there's one cause to really to put yourself down on, it's the desire for representation. So we have two different views. You've read a Thomas Paine chunk. You've read a Thomas Jefferson chunk in Virginia's Declaration of Rights. And it's important to know that while these two people and many people will differ in terms of who should have the power, everybody that is a patriot that believes in rebelling against the British all share the view that representative government, that representation is the key. That all problems can be solved with representation. So go ahead and turn your page. I have the Declaration of Independence there for you. I'm not going to ask you to read it very closely. And I took out the whole list of grievances because it gets repetitive and long. And you guys know what their complaints are because we've gone over all the complaints. But I wanted you to do the same thing with this as you did with the Virginia Declaration of Rights. And you're identifying what are the key ideas of the Declaration, what ideas are we founding on. Since today's lecture is titled The Ideals of the Nation, what ideals do we see in the founding document? And what else do we see in Enlightenment thought, Enlightenment philosophy? Cool? Take 6 to read it for me, please, and then we'll finish up strong. Go for it. 6. Read. Sure, why not? You've already read it before, haven't you? Oh, okay, well, you better read the hell of it. What are the key ideals you see in this document? There it goes. Minute or so left. What ideals can you see present that our country is founded on? And where do we see Enlightenment philosophy? Two pretty straightforward questions. Or so seconds left. All right, so go ahead and take one with the person next to you. Dive in on those two questions. What ideals can we see the country founded on? And where do we see Enlightenment influence? 1 minute, dive in together, go for it. 1 minute. seconds. The answer. All right. So, go ahead.
He mentions, I think it's important, that he mentions that before he told them against how the Tories and Georgia went away, like he says from time to time, attempts for our legislators to extend unhonorable jurisdiction over us.
Yeah, good. That's an important one. Their legislature, parliament, keeps trying to use unlawful jurisdiction. They're trying to tax us without any sort of legitimacy to do so. Good. No taxation without representation. Yeah. Good. Good. What else is present in here from an idealistic standpoint? Kevin Scott, what else you got?
All men are created equal.
Good job. All men are created equal. Thank you, Kevin. Why do you always have the most inspirational answers from me? Jesus Christ. We'll go back. Good. Dahlia, what else? What else is present? What else is present from an idealistic standpoint? Other ideals America has done. There you go, folks. Take it. Why does it keep doing this? There you go. See if it stays there. What else, Dahlia?
We discussed that whenever a government does something wrong, that people have the right to fix it.
Yeah. We have to fix it, overthrow it. It calls the history of the present king of Great Britain is a history of repeated injuries and usurpations, all having in direct object the establishment of absolute tyranny over these states. To prove this, let facts be submitted to a candid world. Let me lay out all the reasons. Yes, sir.
Popular sovereignty.
What?
Popular sovereignty.
Yeah, in a sense, the idea that the power should rest with the people. Good. Oh, is my little USB thing still in? There it goes. Let me get closer. Okay. All right. Yes, Daniel.
I was gonna say also that like this like kind of wide and broad sense of collectivism. Like now instead of seeing it like in the northern colonies at the beginning, now we see it like together. For the one time we see them call the United States of America.
Yeah, for the first time. Yeah, the idea of us, we together. So, just from a strictly structural standpoint, as the war begins, America has some advantages and disadvantages. First advantage, home field advantage. They're fighting the war in the colonies, so they're more familiar with the terrain, they're more familiar with the resources, they're fighting at home. Second advantage, though, is that the colonies, this is important, the colonies don't have to win the war. They don't. What do they have to do? Thoughts? What do they have to do? The colonies don't have to win the war. They don't have to beat the British Army. What do they have to do? They have to not lose. They have to fight long enough so that the British government just gives up and goes home. So they're not fighting to beat the British Army. They're fighting to just live to fight another day and another day and another day until the British are like, F it, never mind, we're out. It's not worth it anymore. And one advantage will become support from Britain's enemies like France and Spain. But from a disadvantage standpoint, they don't have an army. They just, a year ago, for the first time, organized an army, and it's loose, it's untrained, it's not professional, and they don't have any resources, they don't have any money, they don't have any supplies, they don't have anything. And they have a very, very small population. A very small population compared to what Great Britain has population-wise. Britain's advantages are basically the opposite of America's disadvantages. They have a lot of people. There's 11 million people in Great Britain. That's a lot of people. A lot of people to pull from. They have the world's largest navy, which they will use to blockade the shores of the colonies. They have a real army that has been in practice for years. You should always repeat So, and they have support from loyalists, natives, and slaves in the colonies as well. But let's talk about some of the significant disadvantages that the British have entering the conflict. First, Great Britain is absolutely broke. Why is Great Britain broke? War debt, and now they're going to fight another war? So Great Britain is absolutely broke. I'm going to say an important line now that'll be true all year. You cannot win a war without public support. You cannot win a war without public support. And public support in Great Britain is very low. They're like, just let those fools leave. Do we care that much about them? Are they that important? Because Great Britain is very what's called war weary, or they have war fatigue. They've been fighting all these wars for all these years. The people in Great Britain are like, enough already. The war is very unpopular at home in Great Britain. And the British Army and Navy, which is very strong, are spread way too thin across the world. Because their empire is large, and you have to govern your empire with the military, so you have the military that's elsewhere. So all in all, that's kind of the way things look going into the conflict. But it's important that we understand that all right, flip page. Only got 15 minutes left. I gotta finish. All right, I know. 15 minutes left. What's going on back there? All right, so there is significant, despite all the collectivism, Daniel talking about the we, the us, the declaration, there's a significant amount of people that are still loyal to Great Britain, that think that maybe the taxes are a little too much, that maybe we don't need to necessarily be letting Parliament do whatever they want, but there's a whole bunch of people that are considered loyalists who are still incredibly fond of being loyal to the British crown. So in a sense, yeah, it's a revolutionary war, but it's also a civil war. And it's a war of British people against British people. And that's what civil war is all about. What we do see, though, is the people that are patriots are way more vocal, are way more aggressive, and they're way more organized. So the loudest voices in the colonies are the patriot voices because they are more organized and they are more passionate about their cause. Many loyalists are either locked in jail, are tarred and feathered, are intimidated into not voicing their displeasure. But in general, they do exist, and they exist in cities like New York, cities like Norfolk, cities like Wilmington or Charleston that rely heavily on British trade. So it would make sense that they'd be pro-British. Logic. Now the fun part about this is Washington and his army, they don't have to win the war, as I said. They just have to defend as much territory as possible and avoid face-to-face conflict. They're going to rely on guerrilla tactics, and they're going to avoid at all costs all-out war, knowing that if we fight army to army, the British army is way bigger, way better trained. But if we just fight on our terms, surprise them here, surprise them there, run away, be all skittish, then eventually the British will just give up. Colonial militias also play a huge role in forcing people that are neutral to support the revolution. And the thinking is this: as long as England doesn't defeat Washington's army, they cannot win the war. How do you usually end a war? By defeat the other team, other side's what? Army, or capturing their capital, right? Do we have a capital? No. So literally the army's going to just run around for 5 years until the British are like, F it, we're done. Fuck this shit, we're going home. Right? So they're fighting two very different wars. The British are trying to fight to win the war. The colonists are just trying to fight until the British go away. The only battle that I'd ask you to know in the Revolutionary War is the Battle of Saratoga. And I'm not asking you to know that battle because it matters so much militarily, but it's the first battle that the colonial soldiers win And in winning a battle, they convince the French that they have a chance. And once they convince the French that they have a chance, the French openly and publicly, instead of secretly, begin to support the revolutionary cause with troops, with their navy, with supplies, and with diplomatic pressure, pressuring Great Britain to leave them alone. In doing so, they guaranteed that the British would not have access to the seas unopposed, because the French could use their navy. And this really becomes the turning point of the war. There's a good argument to be made that without French support, it would have been very, very, very difficult to win the war. All of these points are negotiated by Ben Franklin, who's been in France since the beginning of the war, begging and pleading with the French to support the colonists. And the French have said the whole time, we love you guys. We want to support you. We believe in your cause. We also hate England. But we're not going to support you if you're going to lose the war anyway. So it's that battle that gave the French enough positivity and belief, reassurance, that the colonists could win the war that causes the French to jump on board. This is my favorite part of the whole story today. 2 years into the war, 1778, Parliament offers to get rid of all taxes, to get rid of all authority, to go back to salutary neglect, and promises to never tax the colonists again. What did Parliament just offer the colonists? Yeah, the olive branch petition that the colonists had offered them 3 years ago. But now it's too late, and the colonists say, no, F you. You had your chance. We've come too far down this road. We're not going back now. So it's hilarious to me that in 1775, the colonists ask England, hey, let's go back to the way things were, and England says no. 3 years into the war, the same thing happens, but vice versa, and this time the colonists say no. So in 1778, England tries to get rid of all parliamentary sovereignty and go back to salutary neglect, and the Continental Congress says, you can go to hell. You can go to hell. Now the war itself is here. I'm not going to stress on it. It's just in the slide in case you guys want to reference it later. But let's talk about the reality. In reality, England never really had a chance. A couple reasons. One, they're way too far away. Right? It was a 4 or 5 week trip across the Atlantic. It's like, we need more troops. Okay, we'll be there in 5 weeks. Right? We're low on guns. All right, they'll be here in about 5 weeks. We're out of food. Right? So the moral of the story is like these long supply lines means it was very inefficient to supply the war effort. Second reason, America's freaking huge. And because the colonists are just fighting a defensive war, running around, minding their own business, hiding out, the British army had to find the army of the colonies and then defeat them. The biggest problem was finding them. Right? The whole time the war is going on, the colonial army is fighting on Washington's terms, when he wants to fight. And then running back to their little hiding spots, and then when he wants to fight. But the most important reason why they're facing an impossible task is from the very beginning, they underestimated the colonial commitment to independence. They thought, we're going to just show up with our army and navy, they're going to be scared shitless, and they're going to give up. And then when that didn't happen, it was like, well, now we're here, we got to fight this war. And again, the way I phrased it last year's class was all the colonists had to do was kick the British in the shin enough times until the British just gave up and went away. Right? You ever have a little kid start bothering you and poking you and prodding you until you're like, all right, man, screw this kid, I'm done here. Right? That's what the colonists are trying to do. So let's talk about women. Let's talk about women. Women are vitally important to the Revolutionary War, specifically upper class women. Upper class women can read. Upper class women can write. Upper class women are going to form campaigns to promote the war, to fundraise, to push for propaganda, to push for public support. And women are also going to then run the households and their husbands' estates while their husbands are gone, either serving in the Second Continental Congress, serving in the Continental Army, and supporting the war effort. Women, as you know, as the Daughters of Liberty, are going to participate in Stamp Act and Townshend Act protests. And women are really going to embrace this new role as their opportunity to push for their representation in a new government. Women look at this like, man, if we can start a government all from scratch on the ideas of equality, why can't we be included in the process as well? It's going to fall, but it's a nice attempt. I know. People like Mercy Otis Warren, her husband is a big politician. She's very influential. Women are going to work as what's called spinning bees, or the women that are working to make textiles as we boycotted all British goods. So women play a pretty big domestic role in supporting the war efforts. But the most important woman for today's story is Abigail Adams. She is the wife of John Adams. And when John Adams is away in Philadelphia, working on the Declaration of Independence, pretty important, she sends him a letter and says, hey dude, while you're over there, you know, making a government, don't forget about us. The letter is very famously called her Remember the Ladies letter, when she's saying like, hey, while you're starting from scratch, maybe include us in the conversation as well. So I have a short excerpt of her letter to John Adams at the bottom of your page there. Keep in mind this is a private letter she's writing to him as he's working on the Declaration of Independence. Or right before actually, but as they're like discussing independence. Take 5 for me, and then we're going to call it a day. Take 5 and read it, and tell me on the right-hand side, what are Abigail Adams' arguments in favor of women? Go. You're reading, and then you're responding. You're reading. What are her arguments in favor of women?